We're very fortunate today to have as our guest Dr. John Butler, who's been a hypnotherapist and working in the field of hypnotherapy for over 40 years now. And John has worked with me personally. So I'd just like to introduce you to Dr. John Butler, an amazing man. And John, welcome to the show today, and thank you for being on. Could you tell me how you got into hypnotherapy and what was your origins and why hypnotherapy for yourself?
Well, it goes back a long time. I suppose from my very earliest years, I had an interest in the mind. It came about in different ways. I think there were cultural influences. There was a strong kind of religious environment. And we would hear stories of people who went to, Mrs. Brown went to Lourdes because of her back problem or cancer, and she got cured. So there was a kind of religious background element to it. And then I think it's just something within myself as well that was interested in the mind, interested in myself, understanding myself and others. So I do remember at a very early age looking into books on psychology and philosophy. And in my teenage years, that was a very strong desire to find out more about myself. And I started reading quite systematically into those subjects like psychology and philosophy, and read whatever material was around. And of course, the more fascinating aspects of psychology, like hypnotherapy, hypnosis, states of consciousness, meditation, I began to look into Eastern kind of mystical traditions, Western mystical traditions, and I began to study things like yoga, and I was into martial arts, which has that side of it as well, the inner power side of it. And I began to teach yoga in my teenage years as well, meditation and so on.
Now, John, this is where now? What country are we talking about? You're in Ireland at this point?
I was in Ireland.
Okay.
I was born down the country in a place called Kilkenny, and then I lived in Dublin for about 10 years, and then I moved to London when it was still very relatively young. I taught a lot of yoga classes in London, and with that, it was not just about fitness and well-being physically. Of course, it was all about the mind, going to different levels of consciousness and awareness, and that's very much about hypnosis as well. Because of course, the word hypnosis is a Western word, but we've all heard about the yogis, who, not just the fakirs who lie on a bed of nails, but the others, the monks and people who go into states of sort of very mental transformative states where they can control their heart rate, their blood pressure, their temperature, all kinds of things about the body. And so you have mind over matter, or mind over mind, the mind influencing somebody else's mind to create behavioral and psychological change. And I was very interested in the therapeutic applications, because I thought, well, if you learn something, you must be able, let's hope you can use it for the greater good. And I studied Western psychology, I did degrees and higher degrees and so on. I was interested in the body, of course, because the two are linked, mind, body. I began to study in medical research, medical science, which I still teach in the neurology and neuroendocrinology side of that. But having studied psychology, then there was the therapy, psychotherapy. I studied various kinds of therapy and qualified in that. Hypnotherapy for me was like the crown jewel, because it is the most powerful and direct way to open the doors to the consciousness, the levels of consciousness, and tune into your inner power and begin to be able to use it. And not only that, but to listen for inspiration, guidance, find your purpose, your direction, your destiny in life.
Well, it's fascinating you say that, John, because obviously Wayne, my business partner, is a yoga instructor and world renowned, and the mind and body work all together. And on our site and in our pathway program, which is really trying to make well-being intrinsic, not extrinsic for an individual, hypnotherapy is what we're all about, because people need to, in a positive way, brainwash themselves to do rituals and disciplines that are going to change their life. And by the way, I noticed that you got up very early this morning. You're an early riser and a man full of discipline. But let me ask you this, John. There was a mentor in your life, which I saw a lot about with you, is a guy named Gil. Could you tell me, what did he do for you and how did he transform, because everybody has a mentor in life or a few people that really inspire them. What did he do for you? And tell me about this great man.
Well, Gil Boyne is a huge name in the profession of hypnotherapy, and one can read about him online and so on. And for me, having studied with different hypnotherapists, and it was a strange circuitous route in a way, because I had this view of hypnosis as more than just giving suggestions and relaxation. And with some of the academics I'd studied with, they kind of downplayed that inner power part of it, because it's not so cognitive and rational and so on. And so that's the attitude was, well, hypnosis has a place in psychology, but it's a tool, and you can use it alongside other methods like psychodynamic and cognitive and behavioral and so on, which is all fine, of course, that can be done. But there was a lot missing, I felt, and my early enthusiasm was still there, and yet I couldn't find people who were teaching hypnotherapy in the way that I was most interested in it, because I believed it could do a lot more than what some of the people believed was possible. So they were kind of scratching the surface, to put it simply. I trained with quite a few people then over time who were quite interesting. I trained with several doctors and people who had been doing it for years. Dr. Jack Gibson, he was a remarkable man. He used it a lot in surgeries. And he was very much in his later years and he was retired. But we struck up a very good friendship. We collaborated on writing up several things. And then it was around that time I first came across Gil Boyne. And I rang him up. And
just cold called him, so to speak.
Exactly.
Okay.
He answered the phone in his office, and we were on the phone for about an hour and a half. I mean, this is about 30 more years ago. And I said, well, let me know when you're coming to London. I can't go to California at the moment, but when you're in London, let me know. And we did meet up, and that was the start of a very, very collaborative period for both of us. Because we would spend hours together talking about hypnosis. It's like when Bruce Lee met Chuck Norris. They were practicing several hours together, and then they realized it's, the lights come up, it's 7 a.m, and we've been practicing here in the corridor for about 6-7 hours. Our immersion, we had the passion for it, and we immersed ourselves so much in the subject. Gil had come through a troubled background himself and used it to transform his life. He became a star in the field of hypnosis for the stars. He was labeled by the press the Hollywood therapist.
I saw a few YouTubes of him last night, actually, because I wanted to obviously be abreast of everything that you've been doing besides your work with myself and a lot of my clients that have been to you. What do you find, John, is the thing that holds people back in life? You talk a lot about the subconscious in hypnotherapy, and I've experienced that myself, where we have the wrong slogans or the wrong messages that we give ourselves. That's obviously layered through time, from the time 5 or 6, as you mentioned in one of your YouTube videos that I saw last night. And I agree with you, because most people's memories go back from those kind of years where, there's been siblings that have said things, authority figures that have said things, and we just keep layering that same thing on and making the wrong choices, or we don't decide the right choices, or we don't act on the right choices. Tell me your view on all those, that kind of idea there.
Well, I agree with what you've said. What is going on with the mind it's very unfortunate for us in a way, because we have layers of the mind, and most people are not very aware of them or educated about them. That we have is, let's put it simply, conscious, logical, rational thing, subconscious, emotional, non-logical process, imagination, deeper intuitive kind of areas of the mind. So, and there's many layers and levels to that. But if we just look at those two, well, on the logical level, we have an idea. We think that's a good idea. That's what I want to do. But the emotional mind may disagree. Say, well, you don't deserve it. You're not good enough. You're not lovable. So you'll have to sabotage it. Or there's some other conflict in the mind about that. And so in life, we are dealing with that part of our mind and its feelings and beliefs, which may be very, very unhealthy, because what we've been through, as you said, authority figures, siblings, our environment may have programmed us in many ways. And because it's the old saying, if you don't control your mind, somebody else controls it for you.
Right.
That part of the mind is always there. And it's intriguing when people began to discover more about this in the 19th century, around that time, when Mesmer did his work, Dr. Mesmer, we still have the word mesmerized,
right,
getting people into that subconscious part of their being, and then the things that come up out of it. And you realize very strongly, Josh, that what's in their mind often is not so healthy, and it may be controlling them. You know, things that were told to them, the scripts that were given them, that you're stupid, or you're useless, or if they're emotionally abused.
Yeah, we've been labeled by other people, and we take those labels on.
That's it. We tend to think when you're very young, well, you believe in Santa Claus, as I've often said, and the Man in the Moon and the Easter Bunny. You believe what people tell you because your rational mind has hardly developed at all at that point. It's only in a very rudimentary stage until, as you go along, 7, 8, 9, it starts to get more stronger. And then in your early teens, they begin to be able to refine, we'd say, that critical analytical aspect of your mind. We sometimes call it about a critical sensor, critical factor. You can screen out information. Even at the logical level, you can say, I don't like that, I disagree with this. But when you're young, you tend to believe what you're told. And so even as adults, you see, if we can bypass that critical factor, as the marketer may do when he seeks to influence you in a certain way through your emotions, through visual images, the language of the subconscious. You see, it's all come from hypnotherapy, modern marketing, and even modern politics in many ways to influence people, persuade them. The world around us is largely built through suggestion and levels of hypnosis. So that's what it's about in a nutshell, Josh, going into your subconscious, putting in reprogramming, if you wish, with the most powerful, positive, constructive ideas to replace the old ones. And sometimes we can just put in good ideas and the mind will accept them. There isn't a lot of opposition. Now, in many clients, there is baggage there that's so negative that everything positive we're trying to do is being opposed.
Right.
And so rather than spend years talking about it in psychotherapy, talking about why it happened and, if only I'd had a different upbringing, if only
I couldn't agree with you more, John.
All of that, right? Instead of talking about it, which is a start of a therapeutic process, perhaps, but it can leave you stuck. We go in and we change the script with programming, or we go back to rewrite it, to revisit it, to understand the past differently, so we can change the way we're being operated upon from within. It's as if many people, they've been hypnotized by themselves and others over time in layers and are following through from that subconscious part of them in a way that they're not properly in control of. And hypnotherapy allows you to take control of that.
Well, you know why I love hypnotherapy? Because to me, it's very similar to what I read in Man's Search for Meaning from Viktor Frankl, logotherapy. Yes. Here's where you are. What are you going to do about it? The game of golf. There's the ball. Okay, realize how the ball got there. But if you're going to keep beating yourself up about how it got there, you're never going to get it out of the sand trap or whatever it is, the bunker. So
absolutely.
And I find that when I had my session with you, because I've had so many celebrities, and you know a lot of them, and we can't mention anyone here, that have gone through cognitive therapy over and over again. And I went to see you once, John, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again, because my problem at the time personally was I had an anger issue about 15 years ago when I had a lot of personal issues and I was working with a very high, kind of flying golfer, and there was a lot of stuff going on. And because of my past, I thought that if I got angry, I could kind of bust my way out of it. But it became a secular thing where I just got angrier and angrier. And you helped me through one of your techniques called regression, and you put me in a hypnotic state. I wasn't hypnotized, but I was so relaxed that I addressed some very important people in my life and authority figures in my life, and my own, fears were addressed. And I didn't need to go back to see you again and talk about my mother and talk about my sister and talk about my girlfriend and talk about my kids, because I like to cut to the chase. It's like tapping. Remember the tapping books? And they if people write a whole 800 pages on tapping, to me, tapping's all about just pausing, thinking, taking a moment. And I love the way, we all have to accept where we are, and back to what we're doing with Super A is trying to change people's mindsets. So what did I say? Like Jerry Garcia, because it's not my line, free your mind and your ass will follow. But if your mind's not free, your ass never follows. And what you did for me and your methods, which I really buy into, which is I don't need to go back every time. I just think of the things that we said together, or you made me get a slogan and a thinking pattern on myself, and just continue those. So as you say, the subconscious to the conscious and vice versa.
Well, that is true. And many clients are in different stages of readiness for change, and they're letting go of their past and the alibi that, my whole problems in life stem from my past. We know they've influenced you, and your environment can influence you.
Right.
I often quote Bruce Lee. When he was a youngster, he had a little card in which he had written, which he gave out to people with his name on it, and said, "Circumstances, hell, I make circumstances." Because truly, there's no such thing. Whatever place you're in, how you respond to it is your circumstance,
Right.
Yogic story about two men in prison. One sees bars, the other sees stars, how you look at it. Well, the problem for a lot of talk therapy is that people do buy into a negative narrative that it's going to take you years to understand. It's so complex with this primal id of you're a Freudian, or you've got to keep changing these cognitions. And there's an element of truth in these ideas, of course, because there is baggage in there. There is stuff from your past, right? And the old story, if you don't understand something about your past, well, you're kind of condemned to repeat it, as we say, a person or a nation. But talking and thinking about it is one thing. Remember, the subconscious is not a logical mind. As Oscar Wilde said, you can't reason a man out of something he didn't reason himself into it. I've known doctors, colleagues who smoke and have died. Well, there's been a big factor in their death, in the problems they've developed physically over as they age and so on. Now, they all knew smoking is really bad for you, but they continued to smoke. So the logical mind says, stop doing this. It's stupid and you're killing yourself. You're wasting your money and killing yourself and all the negatives. On the other side, your subconscious saying, come on, man, this is your little treat. You need it. So that conflict is there. So the idea that you can work out your past by just rethinking it on that logical, rational level is just not true. Now, the people 100 years ago, and I think thousands of years ago, probably realized this, because hypnotherapy is an ancient discipline. If you look back to Greeks, Egyptians, in the sleep temples, they had incantations, they talked about dreams, they put you in touch with your inner self to understand yourself. People had catharsis. So in other words, we're really doing something that's very ancient here, Josh.
Sure.
Bring it right up to date modern terminology. The fixed ideas are the problem. That is what you're shifting. The fixed idea for the smoker that I can't relax with a stab of cigarette, or I need it as some sort of social crutch. I can't relax without a few drinks. I can't shut up the women without a few drinks in the club or whatever. This kind of mentality is just a fixed idea. And if it got in the first place, it can also get out. And we can put in what we want without talking about becoming dependent and codependent in therapy for years and years, which also then gives us an alibi. If only I hadn't been born in this country, if only I had a different background, and the victim culture that we're encouraged by some people to buy into.
Sure. Everybody's
Have the power
shit
to
happens,
change
but it
lives.
happens to me.
That's toxic and
Yeah.
totally incorrect from
Yeah.
a therapy point of view.
Yeah. Well, in winding up toward, what would you say is the biggest stumbling blocks that people have, as I find, to making a change or making a healthier change? And in a kind of synopsis, what is the way forward that you would say, in your opinion, for most people to make a change, to healthier change, to get over the obstacles?
First, begin to look for what your goal is, not what you don't want. Now, people say, I don't want to be anxious, so I'm coming to you. I don't want to be angry. Well, what do you want to be? Sort of anxiety, which is fear, essentially in many forms of it. When you look at it, well, do you want to be more confident, courageous in life, whatever, brave, and so on? So we begin to focus in hypnotherapy directly towards the goal. Now, we do have to deal with what's holding us back. Here you are, and there's the goal, and what's blocking you. So it's very direct and focused in that way. Now, of course, you can go into self-discovery with hypnosis and discover your purpose and meaning in life, and that's a long-term process. But with the things, like you're saying, that people come to therapy for, I can't give up my smoking. I can't change it. I keep choosing the wrong man. I keep going out with the wrong girls, or whatever. We're looking at what that emotionalized fixed belief is, to change it towards what? We must define the goal. And hypnotherapy allows you to implant a goal very strongly and powerfully in that deep part of the mind, which is the real power to bring it to fruition, the part of your deep inner self. And then we can take away old baggage as necessary if it is strongly getting in the way. There's a lot, of course, techniques involved here, Josh. There's a lot of learning and knowledge. And remember, hypnotherapy is the origins of all psychotherapy. They're almost just branches, offshoots. And of course, hypnotherapy keeps getting rebranded and relabeled under various kinds of positive thinking and energy medicine and so on. But they actually all have their roots in this. And holistic therapy, we call hypnotherapy, because there's many aspects and levels to it. So if I was to summarize it, I would say the power that's holding you back, which your logical mind, rational mind, is not strong enough to cope with when it's in opposition, right? I often say it's like using a pea shooter against a tank. If you have somebody, and I've worked with celebrities, people with brilliant talent, plenty of them over the years, who are just damaging, destroying themselves, maybe with drugs or alcohol, or have a lot of conflict in their life. So in spite of all that knowledge, talents, abilities they have, there's a part of their mind opposing them. And it's often a self-sabotaging feeling that they don't understand. We often say they haven't yet learned to respect themselves, love themselves enough. They're into self-destruction. But where is that coming from? And what is it that drives them towards those darker, negative behaviors? And of course, feelings are what driving the behavior, feeling-based thinking. So we have to make an intervention that is effective at the subconscious level of the mind, which is the power and the ability to transform your life, to help your health, to help you in so many ways to fulfill your real potential and destiny, which most of us are only scratching the surface of.
Well, that's our program, a pathway program in a synopsis, but said by a very learned, man. And we really appreciate your wisdom. And I would say, because we haven't talked about your own personal life and personal journey, but I always believe this, that what doesn't work for a person can work for a person, in the sense that the more challenges we have, and literally within the last 12 hours since I've been getting ready for this, I had a business challenge that you've really helped me with, because I've watched your videos and I've listened to your knowledge and your wisdom, and I've applied it, and I have a different mindset because of it. So I'd just like to say, John, thank you very much for your knowledge, your wisdom, and you're also pull out references from the Bible, from literature, because the minute we think we know everything, we know nothing. So although we have certain beliefs and values, we get more recognition when we know in ancient Greece, Socrates said the same thing, know thyself. And if you do, you go a bit further, don't you, John?
We need to respect ancient knowledge because often we think we're coming up with something new. The old saying, nothing new under the sun. Of course, the past, we're evolving. The past had its strengths and weaknesses just like now, but there's so much knowledge that's been around. Now able to look at, we can understand it more in our so-called scientific westernized culture, which we can, having gone in that direction a lot, we kind of threw out the baby with the bathwater a bit.
Sure.
To get rid of superstitions. We can begin to recognize that there was great wisdom and abilities in teachers and masters and philosophies of the past that maybe in some ways they were ahead of us, that we are rediscovering.
Way ahead of us, way ahead of us.
Much of what was so great as well.
Well, John, on that note, I'd just like to say thank you so much. And I will definitely be seeing you and speaking to you soon, and appreciate everything you do and continue your great work, because you really do help many, many people, including myself. Thank you.
Thank you for all of that. I look forward to seeing you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to people about their abilities and power.
John, have a great day.
Thank you, and the same to you, Josh.
Okay. Bye-bye, my friend.